Good morning. I'm Vanitha, Head Department of Commerce, Little Flower Degree College. It is my privilege to welcome everyone for the national webinar on effective research paper writing for beginners. A research paper involves surveying a field of knowledge in order to find the best possible information. It is a piece of academic writing or an essay that presents one's own interpretation or evaluation of arguments about the subject and make a deliberate attempt to find out what experts know and can be one of the more rewarding experiences one can encounter in academics. It is also one of the most important part of student whereby it can make a drastic change in his life. Before commencing the session, I would like to give a brief introduction of our college. Little Flower Degree College, founded in the year 2008, is run by Brothers of St. Gabriel Society of the province of Pune. It strives to impart quality education and believes in excellence. To make this possible, we have expert team of faculty specialized in imparting proficient and dedicated training to future citizens. I would request our technical team to play a short video of our college.
Little Flower Degree College, Uppal, Hyderabad, a Montfort institute run by the Brothers of St. Gabriel Educational Society, has been illuminating the world around with its motto, Lead to Illuminate. In its 12 years journey of excellence, LFDC has been fostering the young generation to be humane and preparing them to compete, realizing their dreams and purpose in life on the competitive global platform.
Good educational environments,
discipline,
practical skills
helped me in getting my first job.
Excellent placement opportunities.
LFDC is an awesome college.
Dear parents and students, Little Flower Degree College, Uppal, Hyderabad has begun its admissions for the academic year 2020 and 21. The online application for the 3-year degree in BA, BSc, BCom and BBA is now available on our website.
Little Flower College,
LFDC,
Little Flower Degree College.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. Sridevi from Department of Commerce will introduce the guest. Over to Sridevi.
Sridevi ma'am, you are not audible. You're muted.
Sorry, sir. Yeah. Good morning, all. Dr. A Patrick has done his MCom, MBA, PhD, qualified NET in Commerce and Management. He is presently working as Assistant Professor in the Department of Commerce, Usmania University, since 2007. And in this tenure, he served as Additional Controller of Examinations for BCom course during 2009 to 2011. Now, he is serving as Joint Director, Directorate of Admissions, Usmania University, and also as Vice Principal for University College of Commerce and Business Management. He has more than 22 years of teaching experience as postgraduate level. He also provided contents for 8 modules for MOOC courses on critical thinking, analytical skills, and learning for online refresher course in skills for new educational architecture under annual refresher program in teaching, that is ARPIT category through Swayam platform on 26/2/2019. Now videos are also available on YouTube. He is a regular resource person for live teleconference programs for Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University, Hyderabad. Prior to this regular appointment in university, he has served as an associate professor at Badruka College, Postgraduate Center, Hyderabad for more than 8 years. He also served for 2 years at Arba Mink University, Ethiopia, East Africa. He is a corporate trainer and a resource person at National Academy of Telecom and Financial Management, Gachibowli. He's an M-panel member for NSIC, that is National Small Scale Industries Corporation, as resource person. He was guest faculty at NIFT for critical thinking and a resource person for National Institute of Rural Development, Rajendra Nagar, and the subjects were managerial accounting and financial management. He was corporate faculty for Symbiosis University, Pune, IGNOU, New Delhi. He also attended advanced leadership program for 1 month at Chiang Mai, Thailand by Hagai Institute, USA. He also attended several national and international seminars and presented papers. He has written a book on CRM, a dyadic exploration in select banks, which was published in Germany by Lambert Publications. He authored books in the area of business organization management, quantitative techniques, statistics. And he also he's working as an in the Institute of Practical Accountancy, Hyderabad, conferred the IPA Best Commerce Faculty Award for 2009. And his areas of interest are accounting, marketing, strategic management, quantitative techniques, and soft skills. We are privileged to have you here today, sir. Little Flower welcomes you.
Thank you, ma'am. Over to sir. I request sir to take over the session.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Vanita ma'am there.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's a wonderful privilege to speak on behalf of Little Flower Degree College. And a big thanks to Brother Vincent Reddy, principal of the college, and Mrs. Jayanti Reddy, who is the vice principal of the college, to Panaga ma'am, who's been coordinating the entire activity, to the HOD, Vanita ma'am, and for that nice introduction. I think it was a bit lengthy. Next time I got to be careful, like what do I write and what I don't write in trying to introduce me. Thank you so much, Sridevi ma'am. And it was all about LFDC, that is Little Flower Degree College. But my memories run to 1990 and 92 when I was part of the Little Flower Junior College, right? And I owe a lot to this wonderful temple of learning, which has inculcated discipline and rigor of learning. And I'm still in touch with some of my teachers who have taught me in junior college where I studied at Little Flower. So it's homecoming to me to get an opportunity to speak on behalf of Little Flower. Now it's Degree College. And I've been to their bicentennial celebrations as well. So it's their 12th year of existence. And I also got to acknowledge that it's been divine providence that some of my students whom I taught probably in UG or at PG before joining the university are working in that college, to mention Mrs. Sandhya Rani, Mr. Vijay Reddy, Mrs. Babita, and a host of others that are there. I quite often visit that college, and I got to mention that there are quite many students who are attending, and to whomever I circulated the flyer, I said it's meant for students and not for the faculty there. But still, they're just to learn, and I got to acknowledge the prayers and blessings that I have from Dr. Vineet George, who's also attending and has been a source of support to me in the recent past, and my cousin Grace attending all the way from Chennai. So that's for the introductory part of it there. So a big thanks to all of you all for making it and having the zest to learn during this lockdown time. So I'm asked to speak about this writing skills. It's more about the beginners, which it is all to do with. And we've all got ourselves acquainted right from our school days when it's to do with the 3 R's, that is to do with reading, writing, and arithmetic. So writing was that important thing where the teachers have gone about with inculcating us as to what are the rules of writing, the proper grammar, the proper spellings. And I still remember the books which were very much prescribed, like Wren and Martin. And all in all, I recall probably coming to the 10th standard, where the rigor was more about writing précis, essays, letter writing, and other things there. And we still continue to write in different formats, but technical writing, when it comes to, it's altogether a different thing. I would only request the ones who are there in the chat room to come back to the listening part. I think I'm a bit of a culprit in trying to wish everybody there. But the thing is, let's not get into multitasking. Let's spend the quality time productively in gaining something. And probably I would assure you that it will help you out. The kind of thing that I have learned from my teachers. I'm trying to share that with you all. And this is where I stand and what I'm trying to go about with doing. So when it comes with the words, that is effective research paper writing for beginners that we have, very clearly the
Sorry
word.
to interrupt you, sir.
Yes, Vijay.
Uh, your audio is not audible, sir. Can you be a bit louder?
I would try to be more audible,
Yeah, there are
Vijay.
few people messaging me.
Messaging. Am I audible now, Vijay?
Yeah, it's audible, sir. Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you, Vijay. Probably you'll have to go about doing some adjustment at your end.
Yes,
I'm
sir.
not that good with
Definitely.
the technical part there,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I
I'm doing
hope
my best, sir.
people are able to hear whatever I said in the beginning, right? Let me get going. The thing is, let me just spend a little time in dissecting the aspect related with the title itself. That is, what is this effective word? What is research? And what is research paper writing? Probably I don't get into the word beginners. And in the process, I'll speak about a broad framework in which research writing is done, and get into in writing papers what are the essentials that we have. And these days, you've got to be very careful about the word plagiarism or plagiarism, and how do you go about with doing the reference and quoting part of it. These are some of the things that I would like to share with you all in the coming few moments there. And I recollect, probably we have all heard these two words quite often there. I still remember, and when I was doing my master's, my teacher telling me the basic difference between the word efficiency and effectiveness. Now, probably the paper writing title is not to do with efficiency, it's to do with effectiveness. So the thing is, efficiency is doing the right things, and effectiveness is doing the right things in the right way. So what you go about with looking at is you can be efficient, but you may not be effective. That's what it is. But the thing is, let me put it this way: what everybody else can do, even you can do it, then you are an efficient person. But what everybody else can do, you can't do it, then you are considered to be an inefficient person. But when are you effective is what everybody can do, you can also do, but you do it in a better way than what others can do, then you're considered to be an effective person. I put it again. When it comes to writing skills, what everybody can write, even if you can write, you're an efficient person. What everybody writes, you write it in a way which is very catchy, very intriguing. People love reading it. You make sense of what you actually mean. You're able to connect them. The readers that are there are in a common platform or a wavelength in which you are there. So these things, when it happens there, then you're considered to be an effective writer. So the thing is, you have to strive for quality writing, and you got to be an effective writer. Now, there are a lot of things when you talk about the word research. This is something which probably I picked up from the IGNO material there, which says you have something to do with a rational way of thinking. There are a lot of thinking methods like convergent, divergent, abstract, critical, a lot of those thinking methods there. But here you're trying to relate what is called as the cause and effect relationship. Now that is what you do in this rational way of thinking. And when you're writing, you're trying to exhibit your expertise, and you're trying to go about with giving an exhaustive treatment to your research question, the reason why you're trying to write that, especially when it comes to research writing. So there is an element of search. So that is where the word begins there. So when we have this prefix of re, so you say regain, rejuvenate. So when you're trying to do it again and again, we're talking about the word searching it and bringing it to the fore. I still remember what Swami Vivekananda had to tell when somebody asked him how you define education. It is where he says that it is manifestation of perfection already existing in man. So what education goes about doing is it goes about with bringing it to the fore. Now, when you look at a person like Sir Isaac Newton, when he was probably sitting under that apple tree, we talk about the famous apples these days there. That is Adam's apple, Newton's apple, and Steve Jobs' apple. But when you look at Isaac Newton, when an apple hits him on his head there, probably he is hurt very badly, and he reacts, why did it not go in the air and why did it land on my head? And at that time, if he had questioned anybody, why do things fall to the ground, people wouldn't have had an answer to it. And they would have said, it's nature, what is there about it? But the thing is, he didn't give up, and he went about questioning it, and he went about searching, and that is how he was very much rational, because there is a cause that you have and there is an effect. There is something called as gravity, and things go about with being pulled to the center of the earth. So that's something where I say there is an relationship between cause and effect. That is where you look at the rational way of looking at things. So you search and you find a solution. There is an element of exactness, but probably I would say when it comes to social sciences, it's probably different. It's more about approximation, but when it comes to natural and physical sciences, it's more about, there is no chances of even a slight variation around there. So you do a lot of analysis. You're trying to figure out what is called as relationship between facts, and there is what is called as critical observation. There's a lot of careful planning, and this is something which is very important as a writer. I keep reading a lot about John Maxwell, where he says that in life, if you want to go about with making it to higher altitudes, greater heights, there, what really matters is your attitude. So the thing is, attitude is also, when I've come across people talking about thematic appreciation and tests there. I still remember attending a training program at Management Development Institute at Gurgaon, at least around 10 to 15 years ago there. And there, a professor from psychology had gone about with putting a picture on the LCD screen at that time. And he asked just to write whatever it is there. And he asked us, whoever could volunteer as to their thing could be read by him. So my piece of paper, what I have written based on the picture that I saw on that LCD screen, I handed it over to the professor, and he read it in detail, and he went about telling. I mean, still I'm shocked that every bit of my inner self he was able to tell with a short para that I wrote. And some of the universities abroad use it. This is called the thematic appreciation test. So your attitude is very important, and it's about not talking in a very broad way, but you're trying to come with what is called as condensed generalization. And when it's the issue of plagiarism, and you go about with getting involved with cut, copy, paste, and other things there, you get caught for academic crimes, and your promotions get delayed or stalled. You're looking for what is called as being honest and hardworking. And this is where I thought of a different way how you understand the acronym of research. Let me just lay a few things about the word research. So here we have an inquiry cycle. So the things that we see around us, when you're a keen observer and when you have eye for details, it goes about with creating a sense of awe. Or you get a surprise, or you wonder about how things happen around you there, and you start ruminating over it. You collect data, you analyze it, you take action, and you share this with others. Now, this is what is all to do with whenever you are inquisitive about things which are there around you. And the next thing is, this is what I've been speaking over the years when it's to do with the word research. Probably I took it from the medical sciences, but let me tell you, when it comes to the word research, be it anthropology, social sciences, physical sciences, natural sciences, it's the same basic foundation that you have. And whenever I get to the word hypothesis testing and other things there, I rely a lot upon the studies which are done in medical field, which go about with forming precursors for the writings that are there in research methodology. Now you find the first word in the cycle which is called as observation. Now this observation is not about just with your eyes there, but it is all to do with your five sense organs. So you talk about your pancha indriyas which accept the stimuli and go about with processing in your mind, and you attach meaning to it. The meaning that you attach results in values, beliefs, and attitudes. So your combination of your values, beliefs, and attitudes is what is your behavior. Now, what I try telling is the entire model of what is called as perception, the way we perceive things. So when I use this word observation, the next thing that it leads to is hypothesis. Now let me split this word. Quite often I would be using synonymously the word research question and thesis statement, or just the word thesis. Now, the thing is, if I split this word hypo on thesis, hypo is tentative, temporary. It is an assumption, or it is a guess. Thesis is the final word. The ones who have done their PhD, if you ask them, now whatever is the work that they have done over the years, they have submitted to the university in the form of a written form of a book, and that book is called as thesis. So thesis is the final word, hypo is tentative. Now, just to go about with making an understanding, an analogy, what we have all learned in a basic chemistry or nuclear physics in school days, there is this person I remember what I have learned was in my school or in my intermediate, is to do with a person by name J.J. Thomson. Now, what he says is, when you look at a watermelon, there are black seeds that are scattered in that red pulp. And he says that when you look at an atom, probably the electrons are scattered in an atom just the way the seeds are scattered in a watermelon. But it's not true today. There were other scientists later on after him, like Rutherford, Niels Bohr. Today we talk about God particle, nanoparticle, and other things there. But the thing is, the truth lies that it was the starting point, and we are here somewhere else. And I always try relating this word hypothesis with the field of law. Today, we find over enthusiastic journalists who run what is called as trial by media. They make people guilty who are accused, who are not being proven guilty by the higher courts of law. Now, I have two things when I talk about hypothesis. Basically, I talk about two statements. One is called as null hypothesis. It would be a little high for the beginners, but just listen to it there. Now, when it comes to the null word, it's something like status quo, no change, no effect, no impact kind of things we talk. And what you're trying to prove and disprove, we write it in the alternate hypothesis. So the thing is, when I use that word null, what do I try to say is, in the field of law, I say a person is innocent. And when I say alternate hypothesis, I say a person is criminal. So in the court of law, you have a plaintiff and a defendant. So when you argue in case, you're trying to find circumstantial evidence and other things there, and you're either trying to prove or disprove whether a person is innocent. When you disprove a person is innocent, you try to claim that a person is guilty. That is simple as that. And the next phase that we have in research is this experimentation phase, wherein we are trying to use that evidence to go about with either accepting or rejecting the null hypothesis. And the conclusion phase is where whatever we have gone about with seeing our observations, we reveal it with very few words, in our own words there, I would put it, it's to do with conclusion. Now, from what you conclude, somebody else observes something, and the cycle would go about with continuing, and that is the reason we call it the research cycle. Now, let me put it this way. Now, there is this question. When you look at this planet Mars, now we all know that all the 9 planets go about with drawing their energy from the sun, and they revolve themselves in their own orbits around the sun. And we always have this question, if there is such beautiful life on this planet Earth, is there a similar life on planet Mars as well? So the null hypothesis, there is no life on Mars. The alternate hypothesis, there is life on Mars. And somebody brought a piece of rock from this planet Mars, and when they broke it, they found a fossil of a leaf inside that rock. Now, when they say there is a leaf inside embedded in that rock, they said probably if leaf is there, life is there, life is there, tree is there, and other things there. And someone brought some pictures of some stones which are very finely polished and shapely. And they said this can happen if there is an air medium, water medium. So if air and life is there, probably it supports life. So the thing is, still we are trying to figure out whether there is still life on Mars or not, and the cycle is continuing. So this is something which happens in our mind, and when we work out for presenting what is called as research papers as well. Now again, let me try little into what is this research, the hypothesis part of it. So I said there is something called as tentative, temporary. It's called as hunch. It's called as guess. It's called as assumption. Some people say it's my sixth sense. There are different ways that you connote this word hypothesis. And I said about the word status quo, and something which is against the null hypothesis is the alternate hypothesis. Now let me get to this experimentation phase. Now here you have two types of experimentation. One is to do with the deductive approach, and other is to do with the inductive approach. So the thing is, when I move from general to particular, I call it deductive. When I move from particular to general, I call it what is known as the sampling method or the inductive approach here. Now let me put it this way. I know there are a lot of UG students who are trying to attempt their GMAT, CAT, SAT, ZAT, ATMA, and a lot of other exams that are there. There is one question that you get on reasoning, syllogisms, logical questions there. And what you notice is there's one question I get which says about all men are mortal, which means no one from mankind can escape death. You say gods are immortal. All men are mortal, and there is a person by name Brian, and Brian is a man. I love this West Indian cricketer by name Brian Lara. So I put it this way: it says all men are mortal. Brian is a man. So when I ask the students, when you relate these two sentences, what is the conclusion you draw? So either you put it in Venn diagrams or you work out your logic. They say Brian is mortal. So here what you're trying to do is you're going from general, which stands the characteristic or traits, which stands for human beings, and you're trying to come to a particular individual by name Brian, and he said Brian is mortal. So here you're using what is called as a population method or a census method. Now I weigh a little over 90 kgs there. We have a health center at Usmania University, and you know, at times I visit that, and I once went to a doctor. I'm trying to fabricate it, but the thing is, I went to a doctor, and I said I have shivering, intermittent high fever, profuse sweating. Probably, I believe I've got malaria. Write that medicines to me. And the doctor there is baffled, and he says, "You are a PhD in commerce and management there. It's me who have to decide whether you have malaria or not." And I get to the diagnostic center, and there a person is waiting for with a needle to be pricked on my index finger, takes a small drop of blood, smears it on a few slides, looks it through the microscope. 30 minutes, he says whether there is malaria in my body or not. Now, here what I'm doing is from that single small drop of blood, we are able to make a generalization of what is there in the entire body constitution. So here I'm talking about particular to general, which is to do with the inductive approach there. This is a little heavy for the beginners. So I started with the word effective, trying to tell the word research. And where do we get ideas for research? Now, when it's to do with business or anyone there, especially to do with the business students, I said that you got to read business papers on a regular basis there, because I also tell them that a cliche that if you're not reading business papers, you're no better than a criminal. We get most of our ideas through our reading habits there, reading, writing, arithmetic, right? So I'm talking about personal or professional experience. So sometimes when you get into the classroom, when you teach the subject, there are students who go about with asking you certain questions, and that gets you to start figuring out. It's not that one needs to know everything, but that questions can ask as a trigger for research. So we are a lot of things from theory. So when you start applying theory, we get a lot of ideas. And then this is the thing that you have wherein we insist that whenever you do research, you have to talk about what is called as literature review. So from media, we get a lot of ideas that are there. And if I get a little more as to what this word research paper stands for, it is a common form of academic writing. So in research papers, it requires students and academicians to locate information about the topic, that is to conduct research, take a stand on the topic, and provide the evidential uh, things that is to do with to support the stance that you take there for the position, and organize a report. The term research paper would also refer to the scholarly article that contains results of some original research or an evaluation of research conducted by others. It depends on different types of papers that you write. And most scholarly articles must undergo a process of peer review. So that's what most of the journals do. And they can be accepted for publication or for any other academic journals. And further, when it comes for research paper writing, so I'm still with the process of dissecting the terms which Panaga ma'am had given me in the title. It's to do with effective research paper writing, right? I said about what is effectiveness, what is research, what is a research paper. Now I'm getting into the research paper writing and the rest of the presentation. So when you're talking about writing a research paper, it is a process of interaction between the materials you find in primary sources and the ideas you develop yourself. So that is the reason it said it's to be an original writing. So your ideas lead you to search out additional material, and these newfound materials lead you to new ideas. Throughout this process, it is you who decides, you in the sense the researcher, you would decide what the material need, discover the connections between different pieces of information. This requires you to understand especially what is critical thinking and abstract thinking and other things there. So you evaluate the information, frame the questions that you seek to answer, and that is how you go about with doing. And before you begin, you cannot know what you will find or what you will conclude. But as you proceed, you emerge from a sense of direction you give to the shape of the entire project. So this is a slide which I thought I could speak on what research writing is all about. And the primacy, the very starting point or the ingredient of research paper is a good research paper addresses a specific research question. So if there is no question, there is no research. If there is no question, there's no research writing. The research question or the study objective or the main research hypothesis is the central organizing principle of your paper. It is a core. It is the pivot on which the entire other things of your paper goes about with moving around. So whatever relates to the research question belongs to the paper. The rest doesn't belong to that paper. This is perhaps obvious when paper reports are well-planned research project. Generally, one of the main research questions should be addressed in the paper, and there could be other things. This is where I'm talking about how many objectives do you pursue in writing a paper. There is one core objective, and there are sub-objectives. We'll come to the word objective a little later. Now, as of now, what is a good research question, right? So, when you look at that research cycle, I said you have an observation phase, you have an hypothesis phase. So you have that element of doubt, whether the null is right or the alternate is right there. So you usually accept or reject the null. So you're trying to empirically test your objectives. So how do you arrive at what is that? We'll look at it a little later. But as of now, what are the qualities which go about with saying that it's a good research question? It shouldn't be very general, and it should be very specific. And it should be an original and a novel idea, or it can be an improvement over the existing idea. Now, when you ask somebody what is the greatest invention, they say it is to do with the wheel. Now, why do we do literature review is to find out on the topic that you have gone about with zeroing upon or deciding to write on, who are all the people across the globe? What are the works that have been done? What is going on? And when you read any research paper, what you come across is at the end of it, you get two things. One is to do with the limitations, the other is to do with scope for further research. So when you read the scope for further research, it tells you what is to be done. So, somebody has stopped a paper or research at that point of time, and you got to go about with continuing from there. And that is what constitutes getting into that research cycle. So literature reveals to you what are the existing gaps in that particular field. Because when you write a paper or when you do research, at the end of it, you got to go about with answering a question. Now, people ask you, what is your contribution? This is already existing. What is new that you have added to the domain of this field or this knowledge there? So you must be able to justify yourself. For that reason, you're trying to figure out what others have not done and what I should be doing. And there stems the word of originality and novelty there. And you talk about the general relevance to the broad scientific community. So that is adding knowledge, and you're trying to figure out that particular thing there. I think there is somebody who's trying to screen share simultaneously. Okay, I think Prasad or somebody can. Prasad sir, I think I'll answer your question in the end there, whoever has raised your hand. So I'm just trying to get into the other things that are there. When it comes to the structure of the paper, now what I'm trying to discuss with you is a broad framework of a paper, which is very easy to understand and remember, especially for the beginners. And I will get into what is called as a detailed format of a research paper writing. When you look at the structure of a paper in which you do the writing, the basic structure of a typical paper, it's easier to remember. The younger ones, I'm trying to draw your attention, it's to do with an acronym or an abbreviation, which is to do with the letters IMRD, IMRAD. Now it's to do with introduction, methods, results, and discussion. So each section addresses a different objective. So the problem the researcher intends to address, in other terms, the research question, is what we write in the introduction part. And what are the research methods that we use to go about with answering this question? We go about with trying to put it in that methods section. The third part that we have is where we go about with how did we analyze the data that we collect to address the research question or the hypothesis testing. We go about with working out in the results section. And the fourth part of a broad structure of a research paper is what the researcher thinks the result means is what we go about with putting in our own words, and that is to do with the discussion section of the research paper. Now, the introduction part of it, again, I'll speak a little more on why introduction part is important. In the introduction, the author should explain the rationale and the background of the study. The thing is, why are you taking up this topic? What is this need for it? And how is it going to help out? What are the past of it? What are the present of it? What are the future of it? Now, these things you go about it working it out. So what is the research question and why is it important for you to ask it at this point of time? You'll have to make it very clear in the introduction part of your research. Well, it is neither necessary nor desirable to provide a full-blown, sometimes I had the opportunity of meeting some professors in Indian School of Business in Hyderabad. And when I asked them, like, how do they go about with working with their research publication, they say that they spend 3 years to 5 years minimum on producing one research paper. They do extensive literature review till they believe that they've exhausted every bit of it. They don't get into the further steps of the research paper. So the thing is, sometimes you provide an exhaustive list, full-blown review, or sometimes what is really important to that field of inquiry that you have. And you'll have to spell out the research question. This is very important in the introductory part. You'll have to spell out the research question. And it is not that you leave it to the understanding of the reader. Okay, it's their job to go about it finding. It's not that way how you do it. And the methods that are there, it should provide the readers with sufficient detail about the study methods that you're going to use and reproduce if it is to do with a replication study. So this section should be specific, it should be concrete. At times you get all the technical aspects of your research here about sampling, tools of analysis, research and other things there. And it got to be fairly detailed because this is something that strengthens or weakens your research. So when you go about with saying that, how you have gone for that conclusion or drawing this interpretation there, I mean, you can always bank upon the strength of your research to be the methodology part of it. So you go about mentioning the study setting, the sampling strategy, the way you go about collecting the data, the tools of analysis that you use. So here what you're trying to tell to the readers is the research tradition. I mean, the utilization of the choice of method. There's plenty of methodologies that are available to do about research there. Now, what have you used specifically to relate to your research questions, to address your problem, is what you mentioned in this methods part of it. The third thing is the research results. So I said it's to do with introduction, it's to do with the methods, IM. So R is results. So the results section typically goes about being very fairly straightforward. It's all to do with whatever your findings are based on your analysis is what you work out here. So it's to do with factual information that you give there. And all the results that relate to the research question should be given out in detail, including the way you collected the data, the tools of analysis, and other things there. And you got to resist the temptation to demonstrate what is called as the analytical ability that you go about with saying for that set of data that is there, providing tables and whatever things that are there, how do you analyze? You do it in this result section. The next thing is to do with the discussion part of it there. And here, this section allows the most freedom. So this is why discussion, this is where what you actually could see from that thing using some scientific principles of logics of interpretation. I request the young ones, if you open any statistic book, it tells you fallacies of interpretation. When you interpret things there are certain flaws. It could be bias, it could be inconsistency in definition, using wrong tools. Now, if you are acquainted with that, keeping that into view, if you're trying to interpret the results and write it in your own words, now this is where it is when you talk about the discussion part of it. So in the discussion, you try putting out, it's considered to be the difficult part, and it is often weakest part because people can attack it because, what people can say is probably your thinking is not aligned with the scientific principles. By using these tools, probably you get these kind of results and not what you have put it there. So you got to be pretty careful in trying to work out. And this is where a lot of discussions go on. I mean, based on what you go about with putting it in black and white on the paper there. So structured discussion sections happen here. And next thing is typical structure of a research paper is where you have the introduction part of it. State why the problem you address is important. So I'm trying to again get into speak on the things which you have to go about with ruminating when you're writing a research paper. So I told about that acronym to do with introduction, methods, results, and discussion. So that is a typical structure of a research paper. But some people say there is something called as an introduction, body, and conclusion. I'll come to that structure also. So here you are trying to tell out as to why the problem you address is important, and you are trying to go about telling state what is lacking in the current knowledge. So that is where I said when you do a thorough literature review, it helps you identify the gaps in existing literature. Those gaps in existing literature forms the basis of the objectives, or they form the basis of your research question. They form the basis of your thesis statement. Now, these objectives, when you want to test it empirically, that is what becomes your hypothesis there. So you go about with stating the objectives of your study for the research, and this is what you mentioned in your introduction. And the methods part of it, you describe the context of the setting of the study, and you describe whether it's population or sample, or how you draw the sample, whether it's random or non-random, little later, and what are the different types of tools that you use for analyzing the data, that is the interventions. And at this point, you'll have to figure out things which you can measure and quantify. We call it as variables. Things which you can say only the presence or absence, but you can't quantify and assign numbers to it. We call it as the attributes. When you're trying to find relationship between variables statistically, we use a concept called correlation. And we are trying to find relationship between things which you can't measure and express in numbers. We use a concept called association. So I'm trying to figure out what are all the variables that I would have to study in my research. What are the various data collection tools that I use, whether I use primary, whether I use secondary data, and whether I use an interview method, whether I use a questionnaire. These days, there's a lot of talk going on about using Google Forms, Google Doc, Survey Monkey. I mean, online, you can go about it collecting a lot of data by giving a link on WhatsApp, and all the data gets pulled up into tables and analysis. The job is a lot easier today. I mean, the young ones that are there who are trying to find out some pertinent answers. I'll tell you a few examples. I had an opportunity of visiting TAPI Institute in Manipal. And as a part of a FDP program, I was there for a little over 14 days. And I tell you that students have found solutions to the industry problems there. And basically, it's to do with the research writing and project work. Few examples, there was this company. We are all used to this sweet candy, which is called as Polo, a mint with a hole. And it was this TAPI school students, management students, who found a solution. Now, earlier people used to carry a bigger Polo probably in their pockets. There are two types of smokers. One is called as the blatant smoker, and one is called as the stick smoker. So the blatant smoker is he'll carry the pack of cigarettes in his pack, and he's not afraid or timid to tell it to others that he's a smoker. But the stick smoker smokes as a pawn shop and doesn't want others to know he's a smoker. But the problem was with the stick smokers. If they carried a big polo in their pocket, people could say he's still a smoker because it was used as a mouth freshener. And the students here did a survey, and what they found out is, why don't you develop a smaller sized polo which will fit in the corner of your pocket, and you're not going to reveal anybody that you're a smoker, right? You'd solve the problem. And same was the case like with Cadbury's. When you buy a chocolate in summer season, you're trying to share with a few people. I mean, it's sweaty palms. If you're trying to break a chocolate and share it with your friend, they said, fine, keep it to yourself. Your sweat is mingled with the chocolate part of it there. So the thing is, you have developed smaller chocolates. So instead of buying one for yourself, you buy the smaller ones for your friends as well, instead of breaking and sharing. And I still remember Shivshwani Institute students had found a formula that there are 31 ingredients which go about with making what is called as an ideal chocolate. So in TAPI, I've seen this, or probably Little Flower College or the other college can emulate this benchmarking thing that I'm saying, that they hold an exhibition every year. And whatever are the projects that are done by the students there, or finding solution to the industry problems, they hold an exhibition. And I'm told around 80% of the students get placed in this exhibition that are conducted by TAPI, and that has been a kind of a legacy which is still continuing around. So I'm just trying to tell out, like, how do you work out with your appropriate methods and other things there? And you give less job, in the kind of a flyer or a video I've seen, there were students talking about LFDC, about very good placements and other things. And, when you go about with doing research writing, it really works well with your CV. It tells what a disciplined thinker you are and how do you write things then. It needs a different kind of a discipline when it comes to writing, because at this time I got to tell out, we all think in our mother tongue. Our thought process, our imagination, our dreaming, everything is in our mother tongue. And when we have to go about with expressing it, it requires this alien language called English, where I find a right choice of words to express. So, most often I find gaps emanating between my thought process and the right choice of words which come. Now, there is a difference between what we speak and how do we go about writing. In speaking, there's a lot of slang. And these days, I got to go about with cautioning the young ones who are more prone for this texting habit that is there. They use a lot of short forms and other things there. Kindly avoid that when you're doing academic and technical writing. And another thing that I have to tell out to the young ones that are there is, you really need to work on your English skills. You need to really work on your vocabulary in writing. What I come across is, in the gap that I had between my degree and my PG, I still remember, for different reasons, my friend had offered me a book to read, and I just got glued and addicted to it. And I tell you, that was wonderful. I'm not trying to promote it, but I believe the young ones should get a hands on to it. I'm talking about a book by name Word Power by Norman Lewis. Word Power by Norman, Norman Lewis. It's a beautiful book which goes about with building your vocabulary. I always take it as an example in the classroom. When I look at a word, when I identify it with its root, when I look at a word, people getting copied or caught copying in the exams, we call it malpractice. When a child is suffering, not getting the right kind of nutrients, we call it as malnutrition, right? There are a lot of other things that are there which begin. I mean, there was a belief that you used to get this fever because of bad air, and that is how the word malaria came into existence then. So I find something common in these three words that I've said is the three-lettered prefix, which is called as mal, which stands for bad. So how do you go about with building on your vocabulary, and how do you go about with using it when it comes to writing? And till today, when it comes to getting admitted into foreign universities, whether it's to do with your IELTS or your TOEFL, GRE, GMAT, it goes about with giving importance to your writing, speaking, and understanding skills there. So you need to really go about with working on that. Uh, be it even the CAT exams where they try checking on English and comprehension skills, which is tough, and you got to work on what is called a speed reading and other things there. So here in the method section, we are talking about the tools that we use for data and the tools that we use for analysis. A little later, I'll try to speak on that as well. The results part that you have is, it goes about with reporting the data collection, how you went with the response rate. It describes who the participants are, probably in terms of gender, income level, education level, and other things. You're trying to figure out the key findings with respect to the central research question, the moot point, the reason why you're doing that research paper, and whatever are the allied results that you get in relation to the main objective. Even those things you go about it presenting it there. And then the discussion part, as I said, it goes about stating the main findings of the study. It discusses the main results with reference to the previous research. It discusses the policy and practice implications that it has with the result. You're trying to give suggestions and recommendations. So that part comes in here. And it goes about with presenting the limitations, scope for further research. I said research papers usually mention it, and that becomes the starting point for the future research papers there. So again, I started with introduction, method, results, discussion. I told it in a synoptic way, and I got into the details again here. And then some of the common mistakes that is seen in manuscripts, what you write and it gets rejected most often. The reasons are, people say that the research question is too general and it is not specified. Now, here I'm trying to talk to the young ones as to what are the don'ts when you're getting into academic writing there. The second is, the stated aim of the paper is tautological, in the sense that the aim of the paper is to describe what we did and other thing there. It is not clear, it is vague, it beats around the bush. And the structure of the paper is not appropriate, it is chaotic. There is no link between one sentence and the other, one para the other. People don't understand that when it comes to the rule of a para, it is one idea per para is what we go with. When the idea changes, we change the para. And it doesn't mean that we stuff too many words and we make people like Shankar Mahadevan breathless, make them read without any pauses lengthy sentences. You got to go about with saying, but tell it as easy as possible. And it said that the manuscripts do not follow. Every journal has its own rules, and some follow APA style, MLA. I'll speak about it a little later. But you'll have to be very clear when it comes with the instructions and sticking to it. And if you don't stick to it, probably they say it doesn't match with our liking and we reject that manuscript. And the paper mustn't exceed the maximum. I mean, today with word processing and other things there, you can figure out, and you got to stick to it. There are a few pluses and minuses, but when it exceeds a tolerance limit, they say that you better curtail or cut short or reduce your writing and send it back to us then. So the introduction is very extensive in terms of literature methods there. Sometimes it's not needed. Very important. Much related with your work is what you need to quote there. The interventions and the instruments that you use is not being given in detail. What are your tools of data collection, tools of analysis? You didn't mention it very clearly. The results are not, reported very selectively. It doesn't go about with giving in depth as to on what basis did you arrive at those conclusions and other things there. And further, the same results appear both in table and in the text, but at times there are discrepancies that you come across. And detailed tables are provided for the results which do not relate with the main research question. That is what I said. Your research question is the pivot, and in the end, you end up doing something else which is not related. See, whenever we go about with judging project reports, theses, and other things, we see the link between the research question, the data you collect, and the conclusions you draw. We want to see a match between them. If there is a mismatch, we find no reason why that project was taken up. So we look for what is called as the discussions, the key arguments, which are not backed up with the appropriate references that are there. So this is all to be done whether the references are something which is archaic, that is very old and obsolete, and it is out of date where the readers can't go about with getting access to. That is the bibliography and references section. So the discussion does not provide an answer to the research question. And you had your research, but in the end there is very little. I always tell it to the students, or I've heard it from my teachers, that there are very general conclusions you have drawn. The conclusions got to draw from your own work, and it is not something which a paper tells, newspaper tells it, or a textbook tells it. So it has to emanate from your work. It has to take birth from your work then. So that is where it is when you say the discussion does not provide an answer to the research question. The discussion overstates the implications, the results, and does not acknowledge the limitations of the study. And the paper is written, this is something which is pertinent. That's what I said. We all think in our mother tongue there. And when you have to speak it and write it, there's always this issue of articulation, finding the right choice of words to express. So, literal sense, the way we think it in our mother tongue, and we go about with writing it, there are gaps. And that is what leads to poor English part of it there. I do acknowledge that it's an alien language. We're in colonial rule. I'm not here to glorify English there. There are different forms of English. There's American English, there's British English, and there is that Indian English or Tinglish and other things. But the thing is, when you're trying to submit to a journal there, we got to be taking care of the written part as well. And then let me get to it. Till now, what I said was a broad framework or a format of a paper where I said about introduction, methods, results, and discussion. Now let me get into the process of writing and then explain the structure of a typical research paper. When it comes to the process of research paper writing, I got to understand what is my assignment. There are a lot of journals, there are a lot of seminars, conferences, webinars, which go about with telling as to this is something which we are trying to look for. Like when Panaga ma'am has asked me, I was asked to speak on effective writing skills for beginners. So I have to understand what my assignment is. I have to understand who my audience is. When I was trying to look at the number of participants at the beginning there, when I logged in, I've seen quite many are doctorates, quite many are pursuing, quite many are students around there. So the thing is, I got to go about with understanding, and I was trying to caution when I was talking about hardcore research things at the beginning. I said it could be a little high, but it's pretty simple to understand the cycle in terms of observation, hypothesis, experimentation, and conclusion. What is deductive? What is inductive? The thing is, I need to understand my audience as to how I put these things. Choose a topic that was already done. So conduct some primary research. What I need to speak on, I need to gather. I did some library references. I drew from my experience. I drew from whatever I learned from my teachers and other things there. The thesis statement was very clear. So when you have to write it, I'm talking about there, you have to create an outline. I still remember my teacher, Krishna Kumar, here at the university, says that put a framework, right? The title, abstract, keywords, introduction, then the research design or the methodology, then analysis part of it, conclusion findings, recommendation suggestions, and at the end, you'll have bibliography and references. He said you have the structure, keep filling it there. So that's one way that I found it easy, and probably will work with the young ones as well there who are trying to write it. I know I'm addressing a lot many UG students, especially the undergraduate students that are there. And I think I had a flyer coming from Sandhya ma'am and from Panaga ma'am as well there, wherein during this COVID-19, what kind of solutions can students go about with offering? They've come out with an online journal. So probably if you have heeded to this particular presentation there, that should really help you out to inspire you to write that or contribute to various other journals there. So you're talking about what should be the structure of a structure of your paper outline, and you're trying to write a draft, and you're trying to go about with refining it time and again, and you're trying to look at the second draft, when I said about the body conclusion. And there is that revision process wherein when you read it aloud to yourself, you find there is, the idea is not conveyed. When you're not satisfied with your own choice of words, how do you expect the reader to go about with trying to make sense of whatever you have written? So that is what happens in the second draft revision. And you have a checklist. I'll talk about it a little later. Now, this is what I said. So I've come across that a typical four-lettered acronym of introduction, method, results, and discussion, IMRD. And then I said about in my previous slide as to the process that is involved in writing. And the next thing is the contents of a typical research paper. And I always tell it, the title got to be catchy. I really love the way Little Flower College had designed it. They said effective research writing skills for beginners. Wow. It's not for the seasoned and the celebrated writers as such. So, the title part. Then you go about with mentioning your name, that is the author. And what I'm told by my teachers is at the footer, you go about it describing from where do you come, what is your position. Okay? So you give an asterisk. If there is more than one author or two authors, you write their names with double asterisk, triple asterisk. And the bottom of the page, you try to give their introduction part. And then this is very important there. This is the crux of your paper, wherein your paper could run into 15, 20 or 30 pages, or at times a typical research paper is 10 pages there, double side or something of that kind, which comes in a journal or so. And there, if somebody has to go through that entire 10 pages and get a gist of it, or a synoptic or a bird's eye view in a para or so, that is what you do in the abstract. So in that abstract part of it there, you go about with telling out what is your research question, what are your methods that you have used, what are the conclusions you drew. Now that is how you put it. And beneath the abstract, you write down the keywords. So these days we talk a lot about digital marketing. So there is this search engine optimization and other things there. So, we talk also about impact factor. It is very important that once you have made your document public, if somebody reviews it and they quote it in their research writing, you get impact factor, or you get prominence around it. So for that, there is hedge factor, index, and a lot of other things that I don't want to bring it to the fore here. But at this point, I have to tell you that the right choice of keywords. So when people are searching for an article in Google Scholar or various other search engines, your paper got to come to the fore. So it is to do with that keywords that you go about with putting in that abstract. And your actual paper starts with that introduction part. And what do you do in the introduction? A little more, I'll speak a little later. The crux is, I said, it is not invention of the wheel again there. You're trying to do a literature review to identify what is already done. So when you read scope for further research and limitations, there you understand. When you try summarizing all your literature review and try to figure out with yourself as to what is not done and what is to be done, you're trying to work out what is called as gaps in previous research, which is the result of the literature review. And you also have to justify as to what is the need and importance of the study. Somebody may ask you, why did you do this study then? When you don't find answers, which means you've done it just for the sake of it. And it is from the gaps that you start putting it into points there, what you want to pursue. So this is what is called as a research question, or this is what is called as your thesis statement, which is to do with your objectives. And most often, they say, even if there is one main idea on which you're trying to probe, you're trying to know more and more about less and less, that is what is called as research there. So you may have sub-objectives, but that is what you have there. Maybe for a PhD level, we talk about 4 to 5 objectives. For a research paper, one moot idea, and you go about with exploring it in detail. So we spoke about that word hypothesis, which is a tentative conclusion. So we are trying to either accept or reject a null hypothesis. So you're trying to give empirical evidence to the objectives by numbers, by quantitatives, by using some scientific methods. We are trying to do it there. And I'll go a little deeper in trying to speak about what is this research design or the methodology, which is called the blueprint or the plan of your entire paper, which you execute. And you identify what are your tools of analysis, and you go about with working out that into detail in the analysis stage, and you go about with concluding your paper, giving your observations, your findings, your recommendations, your suggestions there. And what at the end of your research paper you believe I should have done this. Probably had I done this, it would have given a better shape. So what you couldn't do, or there were some constraints of time, money, resources. Now those things you go about with putting it step by step in that limitations of study. And then you go about with explaining the boundary of your research work there. Again, I'll talk about that in the research design. And you go about with acknowledging what are the different sources from where you have taken the data, and that is from the bibliography and references. Bibliography is the complete list of books that you have come across in trying to make that paper. And apart from books, whatever things that you have referred to comes with that word references. So we talk about bibliography and references. And the next thing is when it comes, I said in this particular thing, I reiterate again, like a typical research paper. Now, this is something which the young ones, I'm coming to the crux of whatever I'm trying to speak out. I said about that acronym, which is a broader way of trying to understand a research paper. I'm trying to give out a detailed research structure, research paper structure here. The title, abstract, keywords, introduction, literature review, gaps in previous research, need and importance of the study, objectives, hypothesis. Then it's to do with methodology or research design, data analysis, conclusions and findings, recommendations and suggestions, limitations, scope for further research, bibliography, and references. If you have the structure, go about with putting your pieces of writing into it there. That makes a paper. Get it reviewed, checked it by your teachers, submit it, check for the grammar, check for the spellings and various other things there. But that is what you do in the refining stage. Little I wanted to speak on the research design. Now this goes about with specifying what are your sources of data. If you're collecting data for the very first time to meet your requirement, you call it primary. Data collected by somebody else to meet their requirement, if you're trying to fine tune it to your requirement, you call it secondary. So it has got both pros and cons. You'll have to wait, and most often primary is there. But the research thing, what I learned from my teacher or professor, he said, till you exhaust the secondary resources, you shouldn't go about with embarking on the primary resources. So there are a lot of tools that we use in primary. It could be observation or it could be interview. So you prepare a schedule or you prepare a questionnaire. Questionnaires are of different types. At this point, I also have to tell the young ones and the teachers there, I'm not trying to market it, but over the years, I've read books like Kotari for research methodology. But one book which has always been a standalone for me in the area of research, or I've shared two books with the Panaga ma'am to a WhatsApp account this morning. One is Writing Research Papers, a complete guide by James G. Lester and James D. Lester Jr., which is a Pearson publication there. And there's another guide to write research papers. And there is Introduction to Academic Writing. Now, these three books, as well as a small guide on American Psychologists Association, the way you use bibliography and references, probably Vijay sir or Anaga ma'am would see how best it can be shared with all the participants around them. Right, let me get back again here. So you need to get yourself acquainted. So, when you read questionnaire design, when you go about with reading what is called as scaling and measurement, or when you talk about methods of research, when you talk about research design, I think you can easily download that book. It's not that difficult. I'm saying it's to do with marketing research by Naresh Malhotra. It's not difficult. So, I mean, this all to do with how you go about. And I tell you, these days there are content writers, there are a lot of subject-related writers writing it for the sake of research, and it really helps you in your promotion, in your career growth, and other things. There, you got to take it a little more seriously there. So, coming from that, I mean, one more word about primary and secondary. The same set of data can be primary in someone's hand and it can be secondary in somebody else's hand. Now, let us say that the government goes about with doing the census for every 10 years. You're trying to figure out what is the composition of the population, on what parameters, how are they doing it, and other things there. So, what we go about with looking at when it comes with the population studies that we look at is there is one company which is Johnson and Johnson, which is keen on one particular figure, which is to do with the birth rate, which is given out by the government census department there. And based on that, they figure out what should be the production rate, their store level or the stock levels, their warehousing, and other things. The same birth rate revealed by the government is primary. If it is used by Johnson & Johnson, it becomes a secondary. Now, sampling. When we draw a study based on reviewing or interviewing people or collecting things there, I said whether you do the entire population or you do the sample. I use the word deductive and inductive. And inductive is what we use most often. Simple things. To know whether rice is cooked in the entire pot, you don't have to smash every grain. One will do it. While buying mangoes the other day, the guy cut a small piece of it and said, see it. From outside it may look green, but inside it is sweet as honey there. And when I ate it, I got tempted to buy bigger ones. What he applied on me is inductive research then. We use it every day, right? And when every element of the population has got an equal chance of getting selected, we call it random sampling. And every element does not have an equal chance of getting selected, we call it the non-random sampling. So it's theory. You can learn about the different methods that are there, the pros and cons that are there, but don't end up using the wrong set of tools. This is where things go wrong. The sampling is convenient, but people use parametric tools for analyzing it. So it needs a little bit of guidance there. Work on that. And when I look at people doing research and ask what is the sample size, they say 30, they say 100. Most often I come across 100. Probably they're fancied with this three-lettered number which is called as 100 there, but they don't give me any specific reason. So you've got to justify why that number you have gone about with applying there. So you'll have to figure out what are your tools of analysis that you use. At this point, I'll have to tell out whether you're studying the entire phenomenon and trying to describe it with a single value, you call it univariate. If one value is being influenced simultaneously by two values, we call it bivariate. Now let us say there is simple enough thing like y is equal to a plus bx in a regression model. Or if there are more than one factors influencing what is called as one value, or we say multiple regression as y is equal to a plus b1x1, b2x2 till bn xn, right? So we talk about multivariate. Now this is a little advanced. So somebody will have to figure out what is factor analysis, discriminant analysis, conjoint analysis, multidimensional scaling, and these tools would work out there. For beginners, something like mean, median, mode, standard deviation, variance, coefficient of variance, with which you're trying to say whether the data, there is what is called as consistency or not, coefficient of variance there. So describing the entire phenomenon with a single data, it all depends. The percentages per se, or what we call measures of central tendency in terms of mean, median, mode. So these are tools of analysis that you have. A little while ago, I said about the scope. It sets the parameters of the boundary of your work. So you talk in terms of geographical boundaries, boundaries in terms of time and concepts. And I tell to the young ones, the future is all about data analytics, artificial intelligence, machine language. There's a lot of free software available in the form of R and Python. I know that people are more focused on learning on SPSS and other things. It's expensive. You get only the trial versions, and if you get hands-on to the expensive ones, very difficult. So I'm telling that if you can master, and SAS is very expensive. So something like RTool and Python, there are a lot of videos that are available on YouTube. There are a lot of video lessons, webinars going on these days there. So better get hooked to it and get into learning, and that really pays off. Your investment of time doesn't go as a waste there. And further, again, I'm trying to get back. When you are into core writing, till now I talked about the structure. In your core writing, when it comes to the introduction, it's here where you present the background and the context for the rest of your article or your writing. Craft a strong opening sentence that will engage the reader. He got to be drawn. He shouldn't say, wow, it sounds boring. Let me leave it or try it again later. Just because you're writing an academic research paper doesn't mean that you have to be dry and boring. I still remember when I did my training at Chiang Mai for the advanced leadership there, they said when you read, the choice of words that you use got to appeal to your senses. The person got to get goosebumps, or I hear whenever you see an accident, let's say something which had happened in Aurangabad, people killed who were sleeping on the rail track. I heard one of the journalists using the word, that incident is something like which curdles your blood. The choice of words that you use appropriate to it there. So that is something that comes by practice, the way you go about with expressing. So explain the purpose of your paper and how you plan to approach the topic, and this should be a factual report that you go about with making the introductory part of it, and describe how you have organized your approach to the topic, and conclude the introductory para with your research question. That's core. So that is something which you'll have to tell out. And then the introduction is broad beginning of the paper that answers three important questions that you'll have to bear in mind. What is this all about? Why am I reading it? If somebody is reading a research article, what do you want me to do with this thing? So how does it help me? That is the other thing that you look for. And I like this marketing principle that is there, where you talk about IDA, which says about you draw your attention, interest, desire, and action. Most often, you have what is called as people, a salesman working it. They draw your attention, create interest in you, draw to the next level, which is desire, and sell the product to you before you come out of that state of trance that you are when they're drawing you into their presentation or demonstration. I like the way the priests go about with working their formula in the churches when they give a sermon. I mean, they put it in a three-set way. They said that tell them what you're going to tell them, and tell them what you've told them. Wow, that is very important. The end part of it and the conclusion of the summary. And the other thing is, whatever you write, I mean, it doesn't sound odd when I use this word here, KISS. It is to do with keep it short and simple. Don't go about with banging, being verbose, or trying to make people to search for thesaurus and other things and trying to understand the choice of words that you have used there. And you should answer these questions by doing the following things, as I said there. Set the context right, what you're trying to write. Provide general information about the main idea, explaining the situation to the reader, make sense of the topic, the claims that you make to support your topic that is there, and then state why the main idea is important when the readers are there, as to why he or she should care to keep reading. Your goal is to create a compelling, clear, convincing essay that people want to read and act upon. So the thing is, it's all to do with the right choice of words and how do you go about with using the scientific principles of writing. And state your research question or your thesis statement or your claim that is there. Compose a statement. I don't know how people are looking at this. Is words that I picked up when I did my training in Chiang Mai in Thailand. I remember it's to do with something of the Greek philosophy that is there. It is to do with ethos, logos, and pathos. It's not our language there. So I want the ones who have joined me in this particular webinar to go about it, spending quality time. I mean, you could get a lot of essays which tell you how you can go about it, creating interest in your writing if you can use these three elements or formula in your writing. Now, logos is to do with sound reasoning, or I used already the word induction and deduction a little earlier, going from
Yes, very sorry for the technical interruption. Uh, Please be with us. We'll resume back within few minutes. Thank you. Just bear with us. We'll resume back within few minutes.
Hello, I'm audible there? Hello.
Yeah, hello, sir. Please continue.
Yeah, yes. I'm sorry. I had a power cut here by connecting with my hotspot there. I'm sorry for the small disturbance that I had here. Okay. I'll just continue. So I was just trying to talk about this ethos, logos, and pathos. And very quickly, when it comes to writing a research paper, the paper does not come naturally to most of us. The typical research paper is a little bit codified. It is in a rhetorical form there. So knowledge of the rules are explicit and it goes a long way in writing. And further, if I take it, I'm coming somewhere towards the end, trying to understand the checklist that you require. So here it says, your thesis statement got to be clear and concise. You got to check out if your paper is well organized and it doesn't follow what is called as the, okay, it doesn't follow the way it should be scientific. I think there's a power come back, so I got a bit confused there. So you've got to have a good beginning and a logical transition. So you've got to do the way your ideas flow in a logical sequence. So you should use what is called as concrete details and figure out your facts and avoid unnecessary generalizations that are there. And you have to have your argument supported with your thesis statement, and you have to go about with avoiding and it's very important that you go about with citing. So I'll come to it a little later, and you'll have to check out. There are different types of plagiarism. There could be intentional, and there could be accidental. So I want the students to understand. I heard somebody in Telugu telling, "What is a thesis?" They say it is thesis rasadani thesis. So you go about with picking up things from here and there, and you do the cut, copy, paste job, and you call it as a thesis. It's not that way. So you'll have to figure out what is that accidental plagiarism as well there. You have to do this editing line by line. Is your language clear and specific? Do you have sentences which flow smoothly and clearly? You have to figure out if you have avoided filler words and phrases that are there. When I'm speaking, sometimes it can happen that I say, I mean, particularly, namely. Now, what happens is your thought process is running fast. To connect one thought process to another thought process, we use a word called cliche, CLICHE. And sometimes we get this thing happening in our writing also. Telugu, you call it the Uttapadam. I'm not sure if other people understand it that. But this is what is called as filler words or phrases. And this is something which is idiosyncratic. It's something which is very unique to oneself. And it gets in even into writing. So you'll have to check if those filler words and phrases are avoided. So have you checked for proper grammar, spelling, and punctuation? That is very essential. And that is what comes for the writing part of there. Now let me speak a little about what is this plagiarism all about. It is presenting somebody else's words, ideas, information, and you pose as if it is yours. So it is specific offenses and includes which are not limited to using copied material without enclosing that within quotation marks or without appropriately acknowledging it in your sources there. Or sometimes we do what is called as overt paraphrasing. We read the entire thing and put it in our own words and believe that it is our original idea, and which is very close to the original idea, in fact. So plagiarism is a form of academic misconduct, and that is when a student goes about with failing to acknowledge the original author or the writer. And at times it can be inaccurate citations, which makes it difficult or impossible for the reader to locate the original source, or missing citations, which give the impression that you're trying to take the credit for others' work to be your own. So that is something considered to be a crime when it comes to the academic circles there. And omitting the acknowledgement part of the sources and trying to paraphrase and summarize it there, and submitting the work that has been written by somebody else or someone else there, and borrowing, selling, purchasing, and lending academic work, which is wrong. And when using documents downloaded from internet, you must provide what is called a citation. So let's little into it there. Now, what is referencing in citation is Whenever you use others' words, ideas, information, or images in your own work, you need to identify the source accurately. You need to give credit to the original creators of the work. So you need to provide your readers with a reliable path, so that that is where the extension of the research. This is something to do with the crux there. The research about the research cycle getting extended. So you got to provide the reader with a reliable path of the original source, and for that we require what is called as referencing and citation. There are different methods that we have, and most often in social sciences we use the APA style, which is called the American Psychologists Association. There is Modern Languages Association, Harvard style, Chicago style, plenty of them. So what I said, I shared with Panaga ma'am, or the organizer of this program, is the APA style synopsis. So if it is shared, or even you could download and read it there. There's a lot of material. And I tell you, if you can master one of that citation principles, we find often teachers saying that they're going abroad for a paper presentation, or they're participating in a seminar or a conference elsewhere in another state, or leading educational institute to presentation. I tell you, it's not as much hype that is required. Young ones, if you invest your right amount of time in mastering the skill of citation rules there, I tell you, you become a very good paper presenter. And further, when it comes to what is this APA, it is created by American Psychologists Association. There are different guides, but each one is basically a set of rules for referencing. So if you have taken a paper from a journal, from a periodical, from a TV show, from a speech, right? How do you quote it in your writing? The rules are there, and when you follow it, you go about with finding that, okay, I think I've come almost to the end. I need to go about with just checking my internet connection if it's there. So towards the end, I would just tell you that you heard me speak little over 1 hour odd, or close to 1.5 hours there. At this point, I just got to conclude by telling you, it is not important what you know. You can attend 100 workshops or webinars or writing and other things there. It is not important what you know, but what you do with what you know is what is important, right? So at this point, I stop speaking, and I leave it to the organizers to go about with getting into question and answers. And before I even give it to them, I would thank immensely all those people who were there behind the show in trying to ensure. And I got to apologize for the glitch that I had with this phone power cut a little while ago. And I think power is restored. Thank you very much. Any questions that I can take from the audience? I'd love to do that. Or probably I got to look at the chat part. And I would just ask for Vijay sir or Panaga ma'am, somebody who would go about with trying to work out. Am I audible? Hello.
Yes, sir. You're audible.
Yeah. Any questions that I can?
Yes, sir. Actually, there was a question you were asking. Suggest free software apps for plagiarism check and how to avoid plagiarism. I think you have addressed it, but some
Yes.
software.
Yeah. The thing is, we use very expensive softwares in our universities there, the Chakravarti sir. So when I have a PhD student, they submit their entire thesis, I just email it to him and he goes about running it on the software and gets it. The free softwares I would tell is grammarly.com. There's one, Grammarly, grammarly.com. It checks your grammar as well as plagiarism. And there is another free software which helps you is Viper, Viper. It's sort of a type of a snake that you have there, Viper. So that is another thing which will help you out with software. Free software it is for checking your plagiarism.
Sir, there is one more question.
And somebody, yeah.
How valid is convenience sampling in research paper writing?
Now, I would tell it, when you use SPSS, you got a tool wherein you can go about with converting the non-random data's results also into, I mean, there is a check wherein it goes about with having its own internal formulae and other things there. But if you're using convenient sampling, your software results would go about the limiting to that paper itself. So when you want to make a generalization there, it has to be the random sampling method. So it could be to do with simple random, systematic, or it is to do with stratified, cluster, multi-stage.
Mute only.
If
From
it is
your
to do with
side,
a
it is
non-random
gone.
method, if it is to do with the non-random things like convenient sampling, purposive sampling, deliberate sampling, quota sampling, snowball sampling there, I think it would limit to that paper itself, the results there. It doesn't help in generalizations there. So most often it is very difficult to talk about the random methods that are there. But the thing is, if you can help out with the constraints and use purposive sampling and other things, it goes well. But convenient sampling, I still remember a senior professor quoting, the results are also convenient, the interpretations are convenient, and the generalization also convenient. So I tried answering that question.
There's one more. Mr. Prasad is asking, can I take conclusion of a paper published and considered it as null hypothesis of my study? Is it ethical?
I want it very clear there. Conclusion of somebody else's paper or your own paper?
Somebody else's paper.
If somebody else's paper conclusion that is there, very much. Because what I try telling is that is the starting point of research. And if you're using your own paper and you don't quote it also, there is something called as self-plagiarism as well there. That is the reason I asked if it is your own paper or somebody else's paper. If it is already a paper which is written, so that becomes a starting point. You can take it as a hypothesis. Nothing wrong with that.
There's one more question, sir. It's asked by Sai. How do I know if the ideas I have about in my research paper is already not researched about?
Now the thing is, you do what is called as exhaustive review. Career advancement schemes and other things, we talk about numbers. We need articles published and other things there. But the thing is, I try telling somewhere that when it comes to an institute like ISB2, they go about spending 3 years and 5 years on one research paper. So the thing is, we'll have to really figure out that when you do that 3 to 5 years, it is exhaustive to tell that you've done everything around. But when you have to go about with meeting the requirements and other things there, I'm not asking to compromise on the standards and quality part of it there, but to the best of your knowledge, if you have done extensive literature review, and if you have understood yourself that these are the gaps in the existing literature, I think that is sufficient enough to proceed on.
Okay, there's one more question, sir. What is the difference between a research paper and a research project?
Okay. Now, I always take it this way there. When I go about with writing it in very detail, I tried answering somewhere in between. I say that if I take one single idea and go in depth of it, trying to know more and more about less and less, and I hinge other sub-objectives around one objective there, I call it as a research paper. But when I go about with pursuing multiple objectives and my time period is quite bigger, when I call it as a PhD or try to get a minor or a major research funding done from UGC and other things, then I call it as a research project. So if it's done at a smaller level and it's done at a grand scale, that is how I take it.
Yes, sir. I think that's all regarding the questions.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the information, such an informative session. Now, Mrs. Pannaga from Department of Commerce will conclude the session with words of gratitude and appreciation. Over to Ms. Pannaga, ma'am.
Good morning. I deem it as my privilege to be given this opportunity to present a vote of thanks. On behalf of Little Flower Degree College, Department of Commerce, staff, students, and the participants, I extend my heartfelt thanks to Dr. A. Patrick for accepting our invitation and agreeing to be the resource person for today's session in spite of his busy schedule. I would like to thank Sir for the insights he has given us on analysis of research and the mistakes committed in the papers and need for good vocabulary. I'm sure the students who are beginners here will have vastly benefited and encouraged by this session, sir. And Sir has also shared a couple of books, e-books with us, PDFs, and his PPT as well. So we will be sharing with the participants through their mail. It was really a wonderful session, sir, and the objective of this webinar has been met. Thank you, sir. I extend my gratitude to all our esteemed participants who have provided us encouragement by registering themselves for the webinar with great enthusiasm. Thank you. I would like to thank our principal, Reverend Brother Vincent Reddy, Vice Principal, Mrs. Jayanti Reddy, for their constant guidance and support. A special thanks to Mr. Vijay and Mr. Raman for their tireless technical support to make the event possible. Thank you. Thank you, one and all. The feedback for this session is posted in the group, and also you can download the certificates after filling the feedback form. You have to do it immediately after this workshop because it will be available for a limited period of time after the session. Thank you.